Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Massias. I'm a sales engineer with InterSystems based out of the UK. And I'm joined by some friends from Northwest London, by Matt Kybert, who's the Deputy CIO for the Northwest London Integrated Care System, by John Littlewood, who's the Head of Development for Chelsea and Westminster, that being part of the Northwest London Integrated Care System. And for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be covering this topic, which is about how Northwest London went live with Health Connect Cloud. Now, before we start, a quick show of hands. How many of you are familiar with Health Connect? Excellent, okay. How about Health Connect Cloud? How many of you have at least heard about it? Okay, good. So I think there should be something here for all of you. So a quick agenda of what we're going to be covering today. So I'm going to give you an overview of Health Connect Cloud, what it is, what it does, what it looks like. Then I'll talk about specifically the deployment scenario for Northwest London. So how have Northwest London gone about using Health Connect Cloud in order to implement integration? And then I'll pass on to Matt, and Matt will be giving a case study of how Northwest London were able to take their on-prem integration instances and move that through to Health Connect Cloud. And at the end of this session, we'll be open to a question and answer session, which will be fielded by the three of us. But there's also other folks from Northwest London team in the crowd as well. Okay, so without further ado, what is it? So Health Connect Cloud is the Health Connect product running on the clouds as a PaaS offering, platform as a service offering. So this is an integration engine which is managed by InterSystems and delivered on the cloud. So a bit more detail about Health Connect Cloud. So at the core of it is the Iris data platform, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. It's a highly scalable data platform. And what we mean by scalability is the fact that it can be used to deliver services such as Health Connect Cloud to very small environments, so scaling down to, for example, a small hospital through to a region or an integrated care system, which is also a large environment within the English NHS. At the moment, it's hosted on Amazon Web Services, AWS, and it's available in the UK, the US, and the European regions. But the intention really is to expand this to a larger number of AWS regions and indeed cloud providers around the world based on customer demand. So a bit more information about Health Connect Cloud. It gives you interoperability. Interoperability, which is very much geared around healthcare. So how the underlying Health Connect product is used extensively around the world for integration. So for example, in the United Kingdom, and specifically in England, it's used by in excess of 60% of all hospitals. Scotland has a countrywide license for using Health Connect as an integration engine within the Scottish NHS. Health Connect Cloud also gives you high availability and disaster recovery across different cloud regions. So if a Health Connect instance were to go down, it will be taken over by a different Health Connect instance within another cloud environment, and likewise with disaster recovery. Part of Health Connect Cloud is also continuous integration, continuous deployment. So we deliver that with GitLab. So GitLab is an optional component for Health Connect Cloud. So if you so wish to implement CI/CD, which is always a good thing, latest technology, you can do that within Health Connect Cloud with the inherent implementation of GitLab. And this allows you to do source control and also allows you to do what is known as configuration management, the ability to take code in your development environment, then push it through to test and push it through to live. It also has a flexible and comprehensive security model, which in the case of Northwest London was very important. So, in terms of operations, this is what Health Connect Cloud provides. It gives you the ability to provision environments. So it gives you the ability to provision cloud environments, which in the world of AWS would be EC2 instances, which are virtualized environments, the load balancers and so on, but also the ability to provision the Health Connect implementations as well, which is to say at the click of a button, you can implement a mirror set consisting of a primary instance, a backup instance, an arbiter, and so on. We also provide backups and database integrity checks, and if needed, we'll do restoration of backups onto the environment in the case of disaster. We also do capacity planning, which is to say that as your use of integration grows, we'll look at how you're using the underlying deployments, and we'll report that back to you. So we'll tell you whether you need more cores or whether you need more memory or indeed more disk. High availability is provided as part of the solution. So this is implemented using mirroring, which many of you will be familiar with. This is done at the iris level, and this allows us to have a primary instance, a backup instance, and then automatic failover between primary and backup in cases where there's an issue. We encrypt the database in order to ensure security, and we also use SSL and TLS in order to encrypt over-the-wire traffic from Health Connect Cloud through to applications down the line. As I said already, we provide you with a CI/CD capabilities with GitLab. Now, bear in mind that this is an optional component, so we're not driving customers to use GitLab, but it's available there as part and parcel of the standard offering if you so wish to do so. And finally, support. As you would expect, this is mission critical, so 24/7 by 365 supports, and we commit to an SLA of 3 nines. So this is the area now that most people tend to struggle with. This is the area that is particularly painful for customers, so upgrades and patching and so on. And this is all done for you as part of Health Connect Cloud. So we will upgrade the environments and the operating systems for you, and they're semi-automated in the sense that we will upgrade the development environments and the test environments. We'll do a certain level of testing ourselves when you upgrade from a version of Health Connect to another version of Health Connect, and you'll do further testing. And the amount of testing that we're going to do with Health Connect will increase over a period of time, so you'll have to do very little in terms of testing of the environment. Monthly security vulnerability fixes, both at the operating system and the product level, will implement those, and in the case of critical security vulnerabilities, we will address those within 24 hours. So what does it look like? This is a view of what is known as the Cloud Services Portal. Now, quick show of hands, how many of you are familiar with the System Management Portal in Health Connect? Okay, so most of you have seen it. This is taking the System Management Portal and bringing it up a level of abstraction to allow you to do things without having to get into the nitty-gritty of the Health Connect product. But that said, it's still available within the Cloud Services Portal, but you'll get a restricted view of that System Management Portal. So this level over here, I'm looking at a particular deployment, which is the Northwest London development deployment, and very simply you can see that it's got 2 cores, it's got 8 gig of RAM, it's actually running on AWS, meaning that our plan is to enable the delivery of this on different different cloud platforms, not solely AWS, and it's running on the Europe West 2 region, which is basically London. Yeah. So very, very simply, you can actually see what the deployment looks like. This is the System Management Portal, which anybody who's used Health Connect or indeed any of the other InterSystems products will be familiar with. But this is an InterSystems administrator's view of the System Management Portal within the cloud environment, giving the administrator access to everything. But a customer of Health Connect Cloud will not get this level of access. Most of these things will be grayed out. So for example, as a user of Health Connect Cloud, I will not be able to go in to create databases, delete databases, create namespaces, and so on. That will be done at a higher level through the Cloud Services Portal. And what you can see over here as well is down here, there's a number of different productions running. And these productions relate to the different trusts within Northwest London Integrated Care System, where a trust or an NHS trust is a number of hospitals. So each of these productions over here is serving the integration needs over a number of hospitals in Northwest London. And again, we look over here at the productions. So these are the productions for the different NHS trusts within Northwest London. But if I wanted to create a new production, what I'd have to do is put in the name of the production over here and hit this button, and it will go ahead and create a database, a namespace. It will provide all the necessary mappings that are required for that to work from an integration perspective, without having to go under the covers to actually do all those activities. So, as I said before, this creates a layer of abstraction on top of the system management portal in order to make it easier for you to actually build productions. And then we look at deployments. So what is a deployment? A deployment is a number of instances of Health Connect and other artifacts that work in tandem with each other to deliver integration. So the deployments that we can see over here are the development deployments, the production deployment, and the test deployment. So for example, the production deployment will consist of a mirror pair of a primary and a backup Health Connect instance. It will also have an arbiter, and it will have a number of different things. But in order to create one of these deployments, it's very, very easy. All you're going to do is just hit that button over there, and it will take you through a wizard where you have to specify whether you want high availability. And if you say you want high availability, then it will create a mirror pair and then state the type of instance you want in terms of the size of it. And it will go away, and it will provision both the underlying cloud infrastructure, so the VMs, the EC2 instances, and also the Health Connect instances for the whole thing to work. So a few words about future Health Connect Cloud development. So there will be an Azure version available by the end of this year for people who want to run on Azure. There will be further regions covered within AWS as well. Google Cloud Platform, GCP, is also being considered, bearing in mind that AWS and Azure are probably the main cloud vendors. GCP is the third. But other cloud platforms will also be considered and be driven by customer demand. So we find customers that want to run on a completely different cloud will implement support for that as well. I think it's also important to note that Health Connect Cloud is not an isolated offering. It's an offering which works in conjunction with a number of different offerings that we have. So there's many sessions in Global Summit that cover some of these, so like the Fire Server is probably one of the notable ones. There's also a session of the Fire SQL Builder. And Health Connect Cloud works in tandem with those. So if you wanted a Health Connect Cloud instance to deliver integration and a Fire repository in order to store Fire resources, perhaps being sourced from your integration engine, you basically just have to implement Health Connect Cloud and the Fire Server and link them together in order to be able to generate the data from one to the other. There's also other services that we're in the process of implementing, one of which is the Master Patient Index. So some of you might be familiar with HealthShare Patient Index, which is a patient identity solution which many of our customers use within shared care records. Now, the Master Patient Index will be a PaaS offering that will allow people to spin one of these environments up and then be able to load it with demographic data and then be able to link demographic records together. So, a few words now about the deployment architecture for Northwest London. So, it's implemented in the Europe West 2 region, which is essentially London, and it's implemented in two different cloud environments. Now, in the world of AWS, these cloud environments are known as availability zones. And an availability zone, or in American speak, an AZ, is one or more data centers. So imagine that you have a primary over here running in one AZ, and then a backup instances running in a different AZ. And the idea behind this is that if this instance were to go down, then this one will take over automatically. If the whole AZ were to fail, which rarely would happen, then the instances in the other AZ would actually take over as being the primary. So you have their combination of high availability and also in-region disaster recovery. So the products that we're serving as part of this is Health Connect for integration, where we're storing 30 days worth of data. There's also the message bank, which I'm going to describe in a bit more detail. Some of you, quick show of hands, how many of you are familiar with message bank? I guess a few use. A message bank is a specialized version of a Health Connect instance, which stores messages for a longer period of time, giving you the ability to search those messages and also replay them. So it's a way of actually creating an audit trail of messages with the ability to search. So in England, sorry, let's go back one slide. In England, we also have a number of demographic services which are in the NHS backbone, and we have a product called HealthShare Spy Mini Services. So this is a UK or England-specific product that gives integration customers the ability to query the National Demographic Service to find out people's addresses, details about their primary care providers and primary care physicians, rather, and also the ability to search on this national identifier, which is known as the NHS number. So that's what the Spy Mini Services gives you. In the NHS, there's also a private network known as HSCN, which stands for Health and Social Care Network, and Health Connect Cloud is integrated together with HSCN. Why? Well, very simply because many of the applications the Health Connect Cloud will want to integrate with actually run on the HSCN network. So that's kind of essential. And there's also VPN connectivity to be able to encrypt traffic between Health Connect Clouds, downstream systems, and source systems as well. So there's one set of instances, meaning one set of instances for all the hospitals within Northwest London ICS. So we then have different integration instances for different places. There's also mirrored production and test. So both the production and test are highly available, whereas the development is a single instance. And that's a fairly typical kind of setup, even on-prem as well. There's one production namespace per trust, but there's also a shared namespace and database. And what that does, it gives the developers the ability to create code, to store code within a shared namespace, which is useful to other trusts. So for example, as a developer within a trust, I might have local development, in which case the other trust won't be interested in it, but there might be some developments, integrations rather, which are common to other trusts. So for example, an integration from an EPR to a lab system, and then I could create that integration and make that available within the shared database so that other developers within the other trust could just pick it up. It avoids having to reinvent the wheel. And finally, security setup to enable separation of concerns. And what I mean by that is, as a developer within one of the trusts, for example, Chelsea and Westminster, where John works, I'd be able to look at messages going through the Chelsea and Westminster Trust, but I wouldn't be able to look at messages going through the other trusts. And then Message Bank. Message Bank, as I said, is a specialized Health Connect production. So whereas we store 30 days worth of data within Health Connect, Message Bank stores data for a longer period of time, giving the ICS the ability to search those messages and replay them if needed. And finally, GitLab is implemented for CI/CD, and VS Code is used for development. Now, like many customers, the trusts have started from a position of using Studio as the development environment. And they're starting to transition now from using Studio to using VS Code as the IDE of choice for this environment. Okay, so I'd like to hand you over now to Matt, who's going to be looking at the Northwest London ICS experience of going live with Health Connect Cloud.
Brilliant, thanks, Mark. Afternoon, everybody. So my name's Matthew Kybert. I'm the Deputy Chief Information Officer at Imperial. I also have responsibilities for integration and application development at London Northwest and Hillingdon Hospitals. Before I start going into the detail of our case study, I just wanted to set a bit of context around integrated care systems and just what's happening in the UK at the moment. So integrated care systems, they're only actually formed as legal entities last April when the UK government released the Health and Care Act. So it's a relatively new establishment, although in North West London we were working in shadow form, as it were. The key national objectives of integrated care systems are to improve productivity and efficiency, provide value for money, and address outcomes through population health. And the project that we're doing here, interoperability and data, underpins those two national objectives. So for North West London ICS, we are the largest integrated care system in London. We've got 2.4 million citizens, 350 GP practices. We've got 8 providers. We've got 4 acute providers, which are Chelsea, Imperial, Hillingdon, London North West, and we've also got mental health and community services, 4 of those within the patch as well. And it's important to mention that with Health Connect, we've licensed that product for all of our organisations within the integrated care system, which is effectively everyone coming together to deliver health and care across North West London. I myself, I've been a resident of North West London for over 40 years. I live in the outskirts in Hillingdon, the London Borough of Hillingdon, so not too far from London Heathrow, where the house prices are a bit cheaper than in Kensington and Chelsea in the centre of London. And so the focus of today's case study will really be the acute organisations that we're working for. But as I mentioned, we have licensed it for other organisations as well. So just set a bit of context around our existing integration sites. So we've got 3 organisations that are already using Ensemble on-premise, and we've got Imperial that's using another integration engine. And across the 4 organisations, we're running around 500,000 messages a day, roughly. We've got a hybrid approach to our development. So with development, John's got quite a big in-house team at Chelsea that do a lot of the integration development on the product. We've got Hillingdon and London North West have quite small teams, and I'll come on to that a bit later. And then with Imperial, we've got a hybrid model. So we use a third party called Optimus Limited, who are here today, and they work closely with our integration architects that are in-house and employed by Imperial. So we've got very much a mixed approach to development across the acutes at the moment. So the question is, why don't we stay as we are? Everything's working, nothing's falling over. So we had several drivers for change, really. So as I say, we've been working as an IT function in collaboration for some years. We've got a CIO for North West London, Kevin Gerald, who's also my boss at Imperial, and he works across Chelsea. And we have another CIO, Robbie Klein, who works across London North West and Hillingdon. So we've got a management structure that supports that collaborative working. And we've also got an EPR strategy. So Imperial and Chelsea are already on that single electronic patient record. And shortly this year, London North West and Hillingdon will be coming onto that single domain. So that was another one of the drivers that if we've got a single EPR, a single integration engine would make sense. We've also got a strategy to consolidate those secondary tier applications or secondary systems, diagnostic systems that are linked to our electronic patient record. And so it made sense that, again, if we were consolidating on those secondary systems, we don't want to have to integrate more than once across those organizations. In terms of collaboration, myself and John, when we try and recruit to posts within our in-house development teams, it's very, very tricky. It's a tough market. We're often fighting over the same individuals, and by bringing our teams together, we feel that we can then attract the best from the market to deliver at scale across a region. So I think collaboration was another driver for why we were going to change. And then we've got other initiatives, so we want to be more agile. We're doing agile application development. We want to be agile with our integration development. And again, linked to that NHS first, cloud first approach, where we're looking to move systems to the cloud where it makes sense to do so. That was also another factor in our decision making. And as Mark mentioned in his presentation, it's about that single management, patches, environment, all being managed for you in the one environment. At the moment, we've got 4 separate teams in our infrastructure teams looking after the servers, the licensing, the cyber patching. It means we can be a lot more efficient with our management across North West London. So when I started Imperial in December 2020, and a few months in, I knocked up this quick slide here in front of Kevin Jarrell just to say, this is where I think we've got a lot of duplication when it comes to integration across the sector. So we've got 4 integration engines. We've often got the same secondary tier systems, and it was just a quick visual to say, this is something I think we should look at doing. And we use this as a basis to build a business case with John, Rakesh, and the team. We decided to use this as a driver just to get a business case in place. And this was post-COVID. So pre-COVID, the UK had a waiting list, elective waiting list of around 4.6 million patients. And that grew to 7.2 million at the end of the pandemic. And NHS England at the time were putting money into digital initiatives that could tackle and address that waiting list problem. Unfortunately, we had our business case ready and submitted that to NHS England, and we were successful in attracting some funding to kick off the programme of work. So where are we on our roadmap journey in line with that vision? So this was our start state where we've got electronic patient records, as I say, shared between Imperial and Chelsea. We had 2 legacy EPRs at Hillingdon and London North West. And then we've got 3 Ensemble on-prem integration engines plus the Imperial legacy tie as well. In terms of where we are today, so Mark touched on this in his presentation, but we've got a single Cloud Connect environment with each with its own namespace for each organization. But you'll notice that we haven't at this stage got rid of the on-premise ties. So we're using the on-premise ties to bridge the connections from our source EPRs and bridging those connections into that environment. And then we've got the downstream systems that we're starting to migrate to connect into that cloud environment. The next transition, which we hope to complete by the end of this year, is we will have all 4 organisations on a single electronic patient record. So London North West are looking to go live with that in August, with Hillingdon to follow in November. You'll notice on this slide that we've now removed the Ensemble on-premise ties for the 3 organisations, Chelsea, Hillingdon, and London North West. Imperial at this stage, we've still got our on-premise tie being bridged, and the reason why that is we're having to redevelop and re-architect those interfaces for that cloud environment. And then our final state that we're aiming for really is we've got a shared North West London namespace, so where we've got those shared secondary tier consolidated systems, we do the integration once. We've still got namespaces for each organisation where we might have some local variation of an old system that needs to be maintained, or there's a specialist service that trust the organisation is running. And then the very final state, which I'm not sure if we will ever get here because it's very much dependent on all of our secondary tier systems being aligned and consolidated across the 4 organisations. Now that is the pipe dream, and that's where we want to get to, but I think we will be a few years away from doing that to get to this stage where we have one single namespace. So our progress so far, we initiated in April 2022. All 4 trusts went live with Health Connect Cloud in October 2022. And you'll notice there's a bit of a gap there, and I'll allude to that a bit later. We've got 170 systems that we've identified across the 4 organisations, and as of June, we've migrated 67 of those systems into the cloud environment. We're continuing to rewrite, with the help of Optimus, the interfaces from our old tie at Imperial into the new cloud environment. And we're phasing this as we go, and we hope to complete our full migration by Q2 2024 is the aim. So what are the benefits we've realized to date? So even though we're doing a migration program, we've actually made a decision that anything new we do in Cloud Connect, in the Connect Cloud environment. So we've got a chemotherapy system that we've procured as a single system across the 4 organizations, and we're doing that integration once through that environment. We've got other diagnostic systems, endoscopy, where we've got a single chosen supplier for our environment, and Hillingdon have gone live with that integration, and we can reuse that integration now for the other 3 trusts to bring them on board. Cloud transition, so Mark mentioned this, the code release from test to live is a lot quicker. We can be more agile, we can share common components as well across the environment. If someone's developed something, it can be shared. We don't have to reinvent the wheel and redevelop it again. And then we've also got that simplified support model that I mentioned, so all managed in one environment. And we've noticed those benefits already from having that. So in terms of lessons learned, when we started this, I don't think we appreciated that it was going to be a multi-year program, and setting expectations with our executives. We often get the question, when are you going to be complete? When are you going to be done? And I think it's setting those expectations early with your organization. If you're doing a complex migration, which is multi-organizational, several integration engines, it's going to take time. And so I think there's something to just bear in mind if you're doing this, is to realize that it could be multi-year. And I mentioned that delay earlier between April and October, so that 6-month setup time. We really underestimated how we needed to engage with our network teams. So we had really complex connectivity. We had to connect into our local trust networks, HSCN, which is the Health and Social Care Network for the NHS that Mark mentioned. We had to have VPN connections over internet. We had to connect to our source electronic patient record, and we've also got third-party cloud environments that we have to connect in. And we didn't engage our network teams early to kind of set out, this is what we're looking to do. And I think if we had done that earlier, we would have been live earlier than we were in October. The other kind of lesson learned is think differently. So when you've got an on-premise tie, you may have legacy systems that are producing file drops to local shares that you need to pick up. When you then move that environment to the cloud, you either need to be able to see those file shares again, which could add some complexity, or you could think about how to do it differently. So you can use CDA, HL7, MDM, move away from those legacy mechanisms. So I think it's just a point around thinking differently and how you can re-architect things. And then using APIs. So we use a lot of ODBC connections to get data for some of our interfaces. Trying to think about moving away from ODBC connections and moving to FHIR RESTful APIs is certainly beneficial when you move to the cloud. And then the final one is about that people, process, and technology. So collaboration and training is key. We were bringing together 4 organizations, 3 suppliers. It's a complex environment. So the governance that we set up, we actually have a governance group where we agree how you name a business process, how you name a business operation, how we're going to architect the environment, and everyone has an input into that. And then we have documentation as well, because if we're all operating on that single environment, it's really key that we're all on the same page. And the other thing we did is, with InterSystems help, is invest in training for the staff. So staff that were doing typical deployments, they needed to be familiar with GitLab. So that CI/CD pipeline integration is also key. So they're probably the key takeaways and lessons learned that I think we've had from our program in North West London. So thank you for your time, and I'm going to hand back to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, so just a couple more slides. So there's been a recent development, so some of you will be aware of this, which is that Health Connect Cloud now is available on the AWS Marketplace. So you can go in and spin up some instances of Health Connect Cloud yourself if you so wish to do so. So what next? I mean, we have a couple of links over here which will be available within the presentations that you have within the CVent event. And one of these links takes you through to e-learning that looks at the broader cloud offerings that InterSystems has, whereas the second one looks at Health Connect Cloud specifically. And finally, try this out. If you're interested in moving to Health Connect Cloud, you have an existing on-prem integration environment and you want to move that through to Health Connect Cloud, it is very, very easy to actually do this. But what I would do, though, is I would urge you to get in touch with your InterSystems account team so they can help you to actually move in that direction. Okay, so we're now open for questions.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Burun Balami. I'm from Atlantic Health, New Jersey, and I have here Martha. This is my manager. Since this is interesting to us because we are also thinking about going to cloud in future or near future. Quick question. So seems like you guys have still some servers still on the on-premise data center, and some of them are already in the cloud. So what's your migration process on that? Like, is there any specific process you use to migrate from your data center to AWS cloud? That question. And with that, when we move to cloud, is all your downstream application also moving to cloud at the same time, or they are still on the same data center while only Health Connect is moving to cloud?
So I think it was our process for moving from on-prem to the cloud.
Yes.
Sorry, we didn't quite get the second part of the question.
Second part is all the connected downstream application with your Ensemble, are they also moving to cloud at the same time, or they are still on the same network?
The downstream application. So shall I?
Yeah.
So I think there's two aspects to your question, I think. One is, and correct me if I misunderstood. The first is, do you do a big bang and move everything over to cloud from on-prem? And the second question, I guess, was, do you also move the source system through to the cloud? Now, in the first aspect is you do it in phases, really. You start off small because of the nature of integration, you can actually break up integration and production into the different pipelines within integration. So generally, a good approach, which is the approach taken by Northwest London, and I'll allow them to speak a bit more detail about that, is to move over piece by piece, typically starting off with low-risk integrations. Now, as for the second question, which is the source and the destination systems, that's really isolated from this, really. Yeah, that's many of the customers I have as a sales engineer in England are moving their applications through to the cloud as well. But that's a different project, I guess. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Matt, do you want to add something to that? Or?
Yeah, I just think, so with the secondary systems we were mentioning that we've got on-premise, ideally we would move all of those to the cloud because it makes, again, the connectivity challenge easier, but that's why we had to work with our network teams where we've still got local systems we need to connect back in. As we gradually move those over time, then obviously we'll have more in the cloud. But I think you're always going to have possibly some things that are running locally that you'll need to consider.
Hi there, I'm Murray. I'm actually a GP from London, so great to see some fellow Londoners here. I guess my question is about, it's very kind of hospital acute focused. Presumably this is the kind of first stage, but the plan is to pull everything in ultimately across that integrated care system. So you can kind of pull in GP data, social care, even mental health trusts as well. Because I know that, I mean, the great thing at the moment, potentially in the UK, is about these kind of much more joined up digital integrated care systems, which I think is a great opportunity, which we haven't had for a long time. So just wonder if that was part of the plan as well.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So yeah, we've started with the acute organisations predominantly because they're the ones with the most systems and most integration needs. But to your point around, yes, GP data, so we're looking how we can get what I think the IM1 extracts they're called into environments. We're looking to work with, in the UK at the moment, there's a lot of talk around secure data environments. So I think the next to follow after the acutes will be our community and mental health providers who've, again, they have versions of on-premise integration engines, and so there's a benefit in them potentially moving over. But we've licensed it as well for our GP community, so we haven't yet excluded anyone, which is really good, so there's a big opportunity.
Yes, I was wondering, I assume there's some desire or need for interoperability outside your region. So does this plan enable that, or how do you see that? Because there are people from South London that are visiting North London, that sort of thing.
So we've been working or talking to the London team to see, there are other, I think South West London ICS have got in touch with us to say, we're keeping an eye on what you're doing. I've actually reached out to London and the Chief Technology Officer to say, there's no reason why, if we wanted to expand the North West London environment to other integrated care systems in London, or you could have a hub and spoke model where you have integration deployments per ICS that we then link up. So there's definitely talk around that. I think others are kind of seeing what we're doing first and then might make the leap.
Hi, I'm Martha. I'm also from Atlantic Health Systems in New Jersey. I was actually wanting you to speak a little bit more about the staff and some of the training that you had to do to prepare. Can you speak a little about that?
Staff training now it's pretty much learning on the job. We're working closely, obviously, with InterSystems. We've been on training courses down in Windsor, the Windsor offices, to learn at the initiation of the project. But most of the training is taking place in-house amongst the team members.
Is there a big learning curve? Because I think what little I saw looks pretty much like some of the tools we're using now. Is there a big learning curve when you're building the interfaces?
Is there a big learning curve?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry I asked.
I'm Nijesh. I'm a technical director at Optimus, helped out NWL in implementing the cloud migration. My question is more towards Mark. Mark, you are mentioning about the other cloud providers you're looking at in the future. But for customers who kind of have a hybrid cloud architecture, say they might have Amazon and Azure, but they just don't want a single instance of Amazon or single instance of Azure, but they want across. Do you have any plans in the future where you are aiming to support hybrid cloud as well?
Sorry, Najeesh, I didn't quite catch that. Did you catch that, Matt? So you're talking about hybrid environments, Najeesh? Sorry.
Hybrid cloud environments.
Hybrid cloud environments, yeah. So, I mean, the hybrid cloud environments would be supported through this. So the idea of having Health Connect Cloud, for example, where some of the deployments were in Azure by the end of this year, which will be possible, and some of them available in AWS it would be supported, But I think it's a matter of cost, So, for example, one of the things that we discussed with Northwest London was about out-of-region disaster recovery. So the solution we have works across different AZs within the Europe West 2 region. Now, the question is, what would happen if the whole of the Europe West region were to go down? But that's never happened. That's never happened with AWS, But in that kind of instance, then you could think about perhaps having a hybrid environment where, for example, we had integration capability within Azure, or perhaps even within a different AWS region, like the West 1 region, which is in Ireland. That's also a consideration. So hybrid cloud is good. I think it's supported. It'll work. But it's just a matter of how much budget do you have to spend on this and the risk involved in going down.
Sure. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
So with this, I think what we'll be able to do is to deliver more information at scale. So where we need to get information from the acute organisations, for example, at the moment, before we did cloud, we would have to talk to the 4 separate teams to do that. We've got in Northwest London a population health tool, WISIC, and we've got the opportunity to link into that now once rather than, again, 4 separate times. Similar with the data lakes that we've got. It just makes it more efficient and you can do it more quickly and at a scale for the whole population rather than doing it. So for instance, Hillingdon, if they just sent their information and the other 3 didn't, that would only cover 400,000 patients, but we've got 2.4 million. So it definitely does include a wider population more quickly when you need to share that data into those other systems. I don't know if that's answered your question, but it's... Oh, I see, sorry. So there's, in terms of population health, it's not an area I cover, but we're doing a lot of dashboard for asthma management, for example, across the patch. We've got our personal health record where we're giving citizens access to their records, and all of that is being driven by the integration technology. So I can get more information on other clinical use cases, but I'm not as familiar with that.
Okay, great. I think we've run out of time, so I'd like to thank you all for taking the time and the interest in the session. I hope you find it of use, and as I said before, if it's something you want to explore, we can help you to explore it in more detail. So thank you very much.